Most bettors do not break their bankroll rules because they forgot the rules. They break them because a bad beat makes the rules feel insulting, not just limiting, insulting. Because if you stick to the rule after a brutal loss, it can feel like you are agreeing to end the day, the night, or the whole weekend down. And that is the part nobody wants to say out loud. That is why a bettor who had no plan to touch the late kickoff suddenly finds a reason to get involved. Not because he wanted that game, because the earlier loss made doing nothing feel unbearable. When you lose because you were careless, the rule still makes sense. You can tell yourself, okay, I deserved that. I got loose. I ignored the plan. But when the bet looked right, when the analysis felt sharp, when the game went exactly the way you thought it would for most of the night, and then some late foul, missed penalty, injury time equalizer, or ridiculous VAR call flips the ticket, that loss hits differently. It does not feel like information. It feels like the universe lined up against you. It feels like pure bad luck. And that is when the disciplined bettor becomes most dangerous to himself, because the next decision is no longer just about the bankroll. It is about proving that the bad beat does not get to define you. That is the Achilles heel. Your feelings stop feeling like feelings. They start sounding like evidence. A lot of bettors think bankroll discipline is tested when they are confused, but confusion is not the hardest test. The hardest test is when you feel right and still lose. Because now the rule is asking you to accept something your ego hates. It is asking you to accept that a good read can still lose. It is asking you to accept that expert analysis can still lose, that even a controlled stake can still produce an ugly outcome. It is asking you to accept that the world does not owe you a correction just because the ending felt cruel. And if that sentence stings a little, that is exactly where PsychBet lives. This channel is for sports bettors who want to understand the mind underneath the bet, not just the market on the screen. Here is the emotional sequence. First, the unexpected loss creates shock. Your body reacts before your philosophy does. You replay the ending. You check the play-by-play. You stare at the box score like there is a hidden apology inside it. Then the notification arrives. Match ended. And somehow those two words make it worse, because now there is nothing left to wait for. No correction, no final corner, no late penalty, no extra minute, just the result. Then your brain starts building a case. That should have won. That was the right tip. I read that game correctly. That was not a normal loss. And sometimes part of that is true. A bet can be reasonable and still lose. A late bounce can be brutal. Variance can make a solid decision look stupid for one night. But the danger is what happens next. Because the mind takes one true sentence and smuggles in a second one. The true sentence is, that result was painful and maybe unlucky. The dangerous sentence is, because it was painful and maybe unlucky, I am allowed to break my rule. That is the switch. That is the moment a bankroll plan stops being a boundary and becomes a debate. And once the rule becomes a debate, the emotion usually wins. Not because the bettor is an amateur, because the bettor is trying to repair something that feels damaged. Not the balance, the identity. The smart bettor has a specific self-image. I am not reckless. I do my research. I have a process. I'm not like the guy firing random parlays in the group chat. Maybe he even says, I used a VIP tip from my source. And that is an important point. If part of your confidence comes from tipsters, VIP groups, or borrowed certainty, that can become its own trap. We have a separate PsychBet video on how your betting tipster might be one reason you make more losses than you admit. But for now, stay with this moment. Because even when the source sounded sharp, even when the analysis looked clean, even when the pick made sense, that identity can still become fragile after a bad loss. The bettor is not just looking at a red ticket, he is looking at a contradiction. If I am disciplined, why do I feel this desperate to bet again? If the betting tip was sharp, why did the ticket lose like that? If I have a process, why does my body feel like it needs another decision right now? Most people do not sit with that contradiction. They try to erase it, and the fastest way to erase it is action. A bigger next bet, a live bet that feels obvious, a second market on the next game, a late kickoff you were not even planning to touch, a redeposit that gets described as flexibility. I used to call it reloading the account. I would tell myself, I cannot run out before I get back on target. But that was self-deceit. It made the next deposit sound strategic when it was really emotional pressure looking for more ammunition. On the surface, it looks like chasing losses, but psychologically, it is often chasing proof. Proof that the previous loss was a fluke. Proof that the research was still good. Proof that the tip was not foolish. Proof that the bettor is still the kind of person he thought he was before the bad beat landed. That is why smart bettors can be especially vulnerable in this exact window. They do not always chase in the obvious way. They chase with language. They call it adjusting. They call it taking advantage of a spot. They call it not letting variance scare them off. They call it staying aggressive, and sometimes aggression is just tilt wearing better clothes. That line matters. Because the bettor who knows the basic rules can always find a smarter sounding excuse to break them. He does not say, I am emotional and I want relief. He says, I still have edge. He does not say, I need to feel even again. He says, the number moved and I have to act. He does not say, I feel humiliated by that ending. He says, this next play is unrelated. That is the trap of being knowledgeable. Knowledge gives you more words, and under pressure, more words can become more hiding places. This is where bankroll rules get misunderstood. A bankroll rule is not just a math rule. It is a rule designed for the version of you who will not be available when pressure hits. The calm version of you writes the boundary because the emotional version of you will try to negotiate with it. After a bad losing bet slip, the rule is not supposed to feel satisfying. It is not supposed to make you feel powerful. It is not supposed to give you the last word. It is supposed to interrupt the version of you that wants to turn pain into another bet. That is why the bad beat is such a clean test. Not because it shows whether you can predict sports, because it shows whether your structure still matters when your ego feels attacked. If your rule only works when the result feels fair, it is not really a rule yet. It is a preference. If your unit size only holds when you feel emotionally neutral, it is not discipline yet. It is calm weather behavior. Real discipline has to survive insult. It has to survive the part of your brain saying, no, 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 this one does not count. It has to survive the late collapse that makes you feel robbed. It has to survive the private thought that says, I deserve to get this back quickly. And that last thought is one of the most dangerous thoughts in betting, because the market does not know what you deserve. The next game does not know what happened to your last ticket. The sportsbook does not give you a cleaner decision because the previous ending was cruel. You are the only one carrying the emotional receipt forward. That is why this is not really about becoming more robotic. It is about becoming more honest. Honest enough to say, I am not evaluating this next bet from a clean place. Honest enough to say, this stake size feels justified because I am hurt, not because the plan changed. Honest enough to say, I am trying to recover my image of myself, not just my money. Honest enough to say, I am trying to recover my image of myself, not just my money. The mistake usually does not start when you click. It starts when you begin explaining to yourself why this exception is different. That is the moment to notice. The exception story. I do not normally do this, but my ticket lost, but this next play is too strong to pass. I just need to get back to even. Every bettor has a version of that sentence. And the smarter you are, the more convincing your version may sound. That does not make you hopeless. It just means the dangerous part of your betting psychology is probably not ignorance. It is rationalization under emotional pressure. So the next time a bad beat makes you want to break your own rule, do not only ask whether the next bet is good. Ask what the next bet is trying to repair. Is it trying to express a clear decision? Or is it trying to undo a feeling? Is it part of the plan you trusted before the game? Or is it a negotiation created by pain after the result? That question does not guarantee better outcomes. Nothing in betting does, but it can expose the psychological hand moving the stake. And that is the point. PsychBet is not here to make gambling look easy. It is here to make self-deception harder, because a bad beat can hurt. It can be unfair. It can make you furious. It can make a good process look stupid for one night. But it does not get to rewrite your bankroll rules unless you hand it the pen. The disciplined bettor is not the person who never feels the urge to break the rule. The disciplined bettor is the person who can feel that urge clearly enough to stop calling it logic. That is the real test after a bad beat. Not whether you can get the money back, whether you can stay honest while the pressure is trying to make you someone else. And if you're interested in a practical self-check on bankroll discipline, comment bankroll and we will send it to you. Not a betting system, not a promise. Just a way to spot the moments where pressure starts negotiating with your rules. If this is the kind of betting psychology you want more of, subscribe to PsychBet. Not for picks, not for guarantees, for the part of betting most people only notice after it has already cost them.